African NGOs are almost entirely dependent on donor funding to support their projects. But external factors like economic recession and policy changes by donors have hurt funding. One such NGO in Benoni is on the brink of shutting down, this after it didn't receive its government subsidy. For more on this, I'm joined by Kenneth Thlaka from the South African NGO Network. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, this problem has been going on for a while. And I heard the gentleman who was speaking there on behalf of the provincial government saying on the back of the Life Esidimeni tragedy and so on and so on. But we know for a fact that this problem has been going on for a very long time.
True.
Where did the problems start?
Look, the problem, of course, it has been going on for some time now. And one of the factors was that the donor funding, more especially internationally, it changed focus from South Africa to other countries. The policies changes, they also affected some donor that has to come to the country. But of course, in terms of internally, one other issue is that previously, around 90s, the government was able to support NGOs in the country. But when things started to change, then the government funding then started to diminish. We created National Development Agency as a country to support NGOs with funding. But unfortunately, the agency, it's not doing that mandate anymore. And things got to change. The act of the agency changed and things couldn't happen anymore. And that's why the situation that we are faced ourselves in as NGOs, we are in this crisis because number of factors are affecting this situation. And we really need to look into the matters. How do we then draw the whole situation so that we are able to get a way forward?
Now, pre-1994, I mean, funding was of NGOs and community-based organizations was skewed. Because the apartheid government knew and understood that its mandate was to service white people in the main. Yeah. Where it went to black people, it was tokenism, right?
Yeah.
It was small amounts.
True.
And these organizations were run by and large by the old aunties and tannies and retired white professionals and so on. Now, in 1994, the NGO sector realizes that we have to broaden this because a majority of the population won't benefit, certainly not as much as they used to under apartheid. And all of them should have foreseen that it was a matter of time before we are no longer, the go-to people. We will have achieved our freedom and we will have to look after ourselves. Was that thinking or analysis at least there right from the beginning? In other words, 1994, yes, there's a lot being thrown our way by way of resources, foreign governments saying they are supporting this new democracy. But the fact of the matter is that it should have been foreseen that that funding was going to dry up sooner rather than later.
It has been foreseen. The creation of National Development Agency was solely on the basis that we knew very well that the international funding is going to dry up. And the National Development Agency was given the mandate to look into funding of NGOs, not only from the government coffers, but also National Development Agency had a mandate to go and look for other resources elsewhere. Looking at the private sector, how can they support the NGO movement? But unfortunately, the National Development Agency couldn't come on board on the way things started to change, and they couldn't support.
What went wrong? Was it because it could not operate? Was it because they were not being successful at raising funds? Did they not have the capacity? What went wrong? According
to me, I think, one, they couldn't raise enough resources. But secondly, I spoke to the former CEO of National Development Agency around this matter. And one of the reasons that they were giving is that the NGO sector, most of them, they were not able to account for resources. But then the question from my side was that when a child is not able to account, do you really just shut down everything? I mean, when there's a snake in the house, we don't ban the house, but we try to look for that particular snake. And the situation went to a level where even the NGO sector was not taken care of, and the NGO sector also collapsed on its own. People are operating on an individual level, and that's why things are not able to be done in a proper way, how we're moving with things currently.
So there has to be, in other words, people who were in the space ought to take a fair amount or degree of responsibility as well, because as you yourself are pointing out, you know, a lot of the things, yes, maybe the baby should not have been thrown out with the bathwater, so to speak, but there was a lot wrong going on within the NGO sector, and some of those problems have not been resolved to this day. Would that be an incorrect summation?
Look, I mean, of course, there was a lot that was not going well, and but our point is that continuous engagement with the sector was more important, so that we are able to deal with those issues. But unfortunately, that engagement was cut off. The minute the NDA moved away, and even the government moved away to supporting the NGO sector, the collectiveness of the NGO sector also collapsed on its own. And that's why it became very difficult for the sector also to look into how do we bring back that voice, the single voice together, so that we are able to challenge whatever issues that are not keeping us on the line.
Now, for the same reasons you're saying, if, you know, the example you made of a child, right, the NGOs should have then realized that the situation is getting worse than better. Wasn't there a point during the past, or over the past 20 odd years, when as the NGO sector you then said, not only is this essential support system about to disappear, but more importantly perhaps, we are about to do a disservice to so many South Africans who rely on this form of support for them to survive.
Yes, look, I mean, of course, the NGO sector has its own time to relook at itself and reevaluate what is happening. We have those kind of platforms. But those platforms are only meant to look into ourselves, but also to share that information with the partners. The partners in this case being the funders and the government and the private sector. But unfortunately, most of those platforms have been cut off. When you see the NGO summit being called by the government, it's on the basis that the Department of Social Development, they want to give the NGOs how they have to run their program that they support, but not necessarily to look into the issues that are affecting the NGO sector holistically. And that's where the problem is, because as a country, we are supposed to look into all these matters collectively with all the partners. But unfortunately, that platform, it's not there anymore. But we just hope, because the president of this country has made a commitment during the SONA to call the social summit, social sector summit. And we hope that that social sector summit will be able to bring that particular platform where we are able to echo all the issues that we have as the NGO community.
Well, the question, I guess, is what needs to be done? And as you have just said, when you go to that social summit that the president has said will happen a little later on this year, what are the issues that we'll be putting on the table that we're going to examine after this short break? This is As It Happens.